Okay, so good afternoon. I'm Arissa Gandia. I'm the chair of the Young Neurosurgeons Committee, and I'm very happy to welcome all of you to the first webinar organized by our committee. Today we have a very, very outstanding moderator who is Professor Bakis Papanasta, CO, who is the chair of the training courses committee, and for me, we can just start. Bakis?
Okay, welcome everybody. There's a very interesting program that's been put on. I think it is very important. It is part of our remit to try and encourage young neurosurgeons to join the course as faculty. And I think it is important, like everything in life, to get a bit of preparation and a bit of tips of how to do things. So 4 of our colleagues today will talk about how to, here I was pretending to be Andreas, and Andreas shows up. So I'll finish my introduction and then you can carry on moderating, Mr. Dimitriadis. So there will be, the format will be 4 presentations from 4 of your colleagues, and then there will be a roundtable discussion. Okay, the first presentation is by Katrin Rabi on how to do my presentation. So Katrin, the floor is yours, and then Mr. Dimitriadis will take over.
Thank you, Bakis.
Thanks so much. So I'll just go ahead and start to share my screen, I think. Can you all see it?
Not yet.
Not yet.
No?
I don't know if I have the option to share the screen. Sorry.
Can you see the green button at the bottom of the page?
Right there, there it is.
The pictures, there's a share screen, and then you choose which one.
Perfect.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Wonderful.
All right, go for it.
All right. So I'm going to share a couple of tips with you guys how I think about presentations. So we're going to just jump into it. And before I go ahead and do a PowerPoint presentation of any kind, I sort of think about a lot about what I want to say with the PowerPoint presentation, or what I want to present. And the way I think we are all sort of trained is that you think of your presentation as the PowerPoint, but actually the presentation is you, and the PowerPoint is your visual aid. So what you need to do is a lot of preparation. Everybody knows that. But your preparation sort of needs to be, what is it you want to say, and to who do you want to say it? So it matters who you want to present to, if it is at a large conference, or if it's a small research group, your own sort of research group. Everybody knows what you're doing. You've been cloning a gene, or you've been doing, some really basic research. Everybody is in tune with what is being done, but in a bigger group, nobody has ever heard of this before. So you need to, sort of have a story that is compelling to pull them in and make them listen to you. And what I'm going to say is that whenever I want to make a presentation, I always have this feeling like, oh, maybe there is somebody in the audience who knows more about this. I should make it a way that is appealing to them as well. But really, you are the expert of what you're going to say. Okay, nobody has ever seen your talk before. Nobody knows your subject better than you do. So you should know that you are the expert, and other people are just there to hear you out. Now, every time we hear something about a presentation, people tell you, you should know your audience. And I'm going to go ahead and say, I think I know your audience. Your audience is one of the two categories. So either it's a person who has been at work all day, either in the OR or in the clinic, or it's the people at the conference that you're presenting to. And in either of those cases, in both of those cases, these people are tired. So I know your audience, and your audience is a bunch of people who are all tired, and it is your job to make a presentation in such a way that it is compelling to them. They can listen to you, and they don't need to spend a lot of energy listening to you. And how do you do that? I mean, that's the really difficult part, I think, with doing a presentation, especially a research presentation, because humans are storytellers, right? So in everything we do, if you can make a story out of it, if you can make it in such a way that it can be listened to and it flows, it doesn't have any we have learned this. First, you have background, then you have your methods, then you have your results. And that sort of thing, it is appealing to us as scientists because that's how a paper is written. But you should think of any oral presentation like this, something that is appealing to listen to. It's not a paper. So your medium, how you're communicating it, if it's a paper or if it's a oral presentation, that matters. And who is listening to you, that matters as well. So if you can try to make it into a story, and again, that's the difficult part, that would be something easy to listen to and have a good take-home message from. What you can use also, and I suggest you use it, is repetition. Try to repeat the thing that you want to emphasize on, even if you've said it in the slide before, try to repeat it. And I think I've seen this, sometimes in meetings, people have a summary, and that's really nice because even at the end of things, when you feel like, oh, I couldn't grasp this really, and then you come back to the summary and you're like, oh, okay, I understood something from this talk. I could take away this couple of points. And again, flow. And how do you make sure that your talk has a flow? Well, I usually try to think through my slides when I'm like, how am I gonna say this? And then afterwards, try to reiterate, try to say it out loud to see, does this make sense? Is this flowing? Does it have a sort of nice flow to it? Something that I often really struggle with during conferences with scientific research being presented is that you have a really nice first slide where everybody grasps, what you're talking about. You say, oh, glioblastoma is the most common malignant brain tumor. And then from there, you go to some really heavy methodological descriptions or really heavy result that has nothing to do with your first sort of really easy sentences to grasp. So what happens is that your first background slide is really easy. Everybody's like, oh, okay, I think I get this. And then once you go to your method or you go on to describe your research, all of a sudden there is this big gap between what you've said in your first slide, which is easy to grasp, and what you're trying to describe. So people are now confused. They're listening to you and they don't understand how did it go from that easy fact to these complicated things. So if you're going to describe something complicated, try to make it easy and understandable, and also try to make the background of what you're describing related to that specific thing that you're going to tell us about. Don't go from some easy statements to just jump over to really heavy basic research. And this is a good principle, the KISS principle, keep it simple. I'd say when it comes to your story, when it comes to your slides, when it comes to what you're going to tell people, I think keeping it really simple is really important. Also, when you're making slides, try to not throw out a lot of words on the slides, keep it short. And I have shown you a little bit of what's going on, but there is actually a magic number of how many things you can throw on your slide. And that's 6. The reason for that is that if you make more than 6 objects, this is neuroscience, we are not particularly good thinking about these things as neurosurgeons, but if you throw out more than 6 things on a slide, the brain kind of has to use 500 times more energy to read those, to take those in. 6 simple things, we can see those things. We don't need to count them. We don't need to read them carefully. And with these 6 things, there should be one message on one slide, not tons of different things. What a lot of us do is we try to condense 35 slides into one slide, and that loses your audience. And another thing I think this is really important when it comes to scientific presentations is the redundancy effect. Now, what is that? I found a really good slide that shows what the redundancy effect is, and it's about the redundancy effect, okay? So this is a great slide because it is absolutely wrong in every way, and it's talking about the redundancy effect. So this is really great. And I'm going to go through this. First of all, you really get tired just looking at it. It's like, what is it about? And all I personally can do is I just look at the first colorful line up there, because that's what we as humans, our eyes are drawn to color. So I'm seeing just a colorful first row, and the rest is sort of a blur to me. And also what this does is you have, a lot of text on the background. So unfortunately, what happens in our brain is this. This is what the redundancy effect is. If you have a slide with a lot of text and you're talking at the same time, what your brain is doing is 1 + 1 = 0, okay? You're not listening to what I'm saying, and you're not reading the text. So everything blurts out into nothing. Something else that I'm doing on this slide that you're seeing is that I have a black background and I'm using contrast. So I have white text, and that sort of relaxes the eyes, relaxes you. So you're seeing this, you're taking in what I'm saying. It's not particularly interesting to look at the slide. So you're instead looking at me, which is what the slide is supposed to do also. It's supposed to take away your attention to who the real presenter is. It's not the PowerPoint, it's the person who's doing it. So another thing that I think, this is a really short time, I'm trying to give you all my best tips, is that if you're using numbers in your presentation, I suggest you make them count. And what I mean with that is that most of us have learned to not use tables like this. Instead, what we do is that we circle in a number on our sort of table with a red dot or something like this, which is, I guess it's better than just leaving the table there. But oftentimes this doesn't tell the audience a whole lot. If you can, try to think of the numbers, try to translate the numbers to your audience. So try to instead say, okay, we measured the gait, and that was the speed of the gait was doubled, or the patient could walk 4 more steps. Try to translate the number to your audience instead of just throwing numbers out there, because the brain forgets the numbers, but everybody can remember something being, you know, a volume being reduced to half, or a patient being able to walk 5 more steps or something like that. So in summary, keep it simple. If you can't explain simple enough, you don't understand it well enough. Try to use images rather than text, few objects each slide, and storytelling flow, and also translate your numbers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katrin. Nice and simple, as you said, but that's the art, isn't it? We can discuss that later. Let's move on straight to Marisa, the chairperson of the Young Neurosurgeons Committee, and the topic is how I master audience engagement. Thank you, Marisa.
Let me share my screen. Now you can see it? Yeah?
Yes, if you
yes,
go to...
If you could only put it into the slideshow.
Like that?
Yes,
okay.
Perfect.
Okay. I'm Marisa Gandia. Yeah, I have introduced me before. I'm the chair of the Young Neurosurgeons, and I don't have to say again that I'm super happy this is the first webinar by the Young Neurosurgeons. And I'm going to talk about how I master audience engagement. Oh, it doesn't work. Maybe. Okay, that. So before starting at all, you have to remember the 4 P's to give a good presentation. The first P is the positive thinking. You have to approach it like with a calm mood, not feel any fear of the public, of speaking in public, because at the end they are coming there to listen to you, and you have to overcome anxiety, which is not easy at the beginning. The second thing, as Katrin said, is the preparation. If you are prepared and you have make it for some time, you know your audience and you develop your ideas, it's much easier to keep a structure that is like a storytelling, as she said, and normally you have to answer a question or to discuss some discussing topics, and to combine all a structure with the story. The third P will be the practice. You can practice this on your own. You can practice this recording in a camera. You can practice this with an audience. You can use your family or your friends to do so. And the fourth thing, the 4P, which is the most interesting for this talk, is the performance. When you give a talk, it's not only what you have presenting in the slides or what you are saying, it's also your performance. Here you have to experience neurosurgeons talking. As you can see, they are relaxed and focused on the talk. That's what you have to do. You have to involve the audience, feeling under control with your body language, with your voice, and also with your thinking and saying. And you have to cope with the time limit and the interruption, and not to make nervous about that. So to cope with that, before presentation, you can use some mindfulness or some meditation techniques, like press your fingers or breathe deeply, or just to keep your mind off of what's happening in the auditorium and go back when you have to present. So to master your audience engagement, you have 3 tips. The first tip is to enhance the engagement of the attendees. Use your techniques and your tools to do so. The second tip will be to use your personal impact. Everyone has a personal impact in the voice, in the body language, and this is important to know how to use it, because this is the majority of your message. And the third tip will be to control your audience, to keep the feedback with your audience constantly. So the first tip will be to enhance engagement of your audience with your tips. Your objective is that they gain some knowledge. This is not your objective. You have to remember your objective is not to get them boring with your very long speech. A talk should not be more than 10-15 minutes, and a slide should not have more than 6 sentences. No, Catherine said that, and it's true. And to make them gain, you have to be interactive. So you need to make questions, boomerang questions, for example, or you can do discussion groups, or you can just follow your discourse, follow your storytelling with the tips to make them to think and to ask themselves several questions. That's how you can enhance the engagement. Because unfortunately, here we have different resources we use to teach our trainees: the audiovisual, the lecture, the reading, demonstrations, and at the end, unfortunately, this is what they take home. So when we give a lecture, they only retain 5% of what we are saying. They only retain 10% of what we are showing in the slides, written. 20% of the audiovisual, our pics, our photos, surgeries, or videos, and 30% when we show a demonstration. But the percentage is increased when you promote, for example, a discussion group. Even like that, they only retain 50%. In the best of the cases, in a lecture, they only retain 50% of our discussion. So it's our work to make them to feel active and to be interactive, to get at least 50%. So to enhance engagement, we need to have and to create a positive learning environment, to have the total participant involvement, to promote the collaboration amongst attendees, and to promote also variety of different opinions. And with that, you can enhance the engagement. The second part you can use is your personal impact. And what's your personal impact? It's not only the message, because do you realize that what you say is actually not as important than how you say it? I mean, no matter how interesting your speech looks on the slides, if you deliver it in a boring, monotone, standing there in front of everybody, the value of your presentation comes to nothing. So it's very important how you transmit, how you send the message. And for that, you have to know that with your spoken words, are only 7%. So 58% is your voice, your tone, your emphasis. And 55% is your body language, how you transmit what you are saying. And the most important thing, all 3 parts, body language, voice, and a message, and writing message, and spoken language should be congruent. Because non-verbal elements are very important, but are particularly important for communicating feelings and attitude, and they are particularly important when they are incongruent. If your body language is incongruent with what you are saying, it's likely that your attendees will believe your body language and not what you are saying, which is a problem. So your voice is very important because words mean more than what is set down on the paper and on the slides, and it takes the human voice to infuse them with deeper meaning. Your voice is the channel to send information and make the information become something important, gives a meaning, because your voice is a musical instrument. It has endless emotional capacity and is able to make deepest impressions like suspense, enthusiasm, excitement. So please focus on your voice, the loudness, how you articulate the words, the speed you use, the emphasis, the range, because the voice is your main instrument while giving a presentation. Thereafter, you have another tools like the slides, but your voice is the main instrument. And the most important thing, you have to try to sound, or you have to sound natural and to be vivid and eloquent. The second thing for giving a personal impact is the body language. As you can see here in these faces, Every face can show you a different feeling and can impress you and can provoke you a different feeling. That's important also when you are giving a talk, because you can show excitement for a technique, or you can show disagreement with a technique, or you can show just nothing. So be confident, use your personal impact, and let the technology only support you. Because as Catherine said, and I repeat it, it's redundancy now, but I repeat it, the presentation is you. So bring quality images, bring quality video, use chart, summary, mind the fonts and colors. And if you are nervous, bring your own, bring your microphone, bring your pointers, and they you won't make nervous. The last thing is to manage the audience, to feel like that, like this guy. And how to manage the audience. Always believe that the audience wants you to do well, and the audience is there for listening what you are saying. So you have to believe in your success. If you make nervous, breathe and hold the power pose. The power pose is with the legs open, the feet on the floor, the breast up, breathing, and pause, smile, and try to make eye contact with the persons who are listening you. Then you can manage your nerves. What may happen? You can find different participant behaviors that can be a problem for you. The person who is speaking continuously, the person who shows the agreement with what you are saying, the skeptical one, the boring one, the super happy one, or the tired one. How to manage that? To manage that, you have to, you can stop those impressions, you can stop those phases if you set expectations. That's what it's called, what's in it for me, because that's what your audience is thinking. When they are listening your talk and they are watching your slides, they are thinking, what's in it for me? So if you set their expectations and you remind their expectations, you can keep your audience engaged. And if you have the perception that's not happening, you can always use boomerang questions, or even stop and use a discussion group. The last thing to engage your audience is to pay attention, the feedback. So pay attention what's happening, show that you are listening, respond appropriately to the questions, and use your feedback, because humans have this capacity. You can use your feedback to modulate your talk regarding what's happening in the audience. So in summary, be prepared with the 4 Ps, be confident, enhance engagement, use your personal impact with your power pose, and be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Marisa. Good advice on verbal and non-verbal strategies. I like your background with the flowers. This is a professional Zoom presenter we're having here. So we'll move. Thank you, Marisa. We'll move to Netanel Ben Shalom on a slightly different topic: how I educate residents. Netanel.
Hi, can you see my screen?
Yes, if you could just put on a slideshow. Yes, perfect.
All right, so first of all, thank you so much for the invitation to talk in this great webinar. I'll try to follow Marisa's advice and Catherine about the presentation and be short and concise. So before I start, a little bit about my background related to the topic of how I educate residents. So I've been all over the place in terms of, I was privileged and lucky enough to be able to practice medicine throughout my journey of neurosurgery in Israel. I went to med school in Hungary. I did my first year of residency in NYU in New York. Then I went to try some neurosurgery in Stockholm, then went back to Israel, and essentially followed my fellowships both in New York and Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. So I've seen some medical systems and training, and I'll try to give my, my personal spiel and advice on how to educate residents. I'm very young. in terms of my training. It's only my second year after I finished residency, but I'll try to share at least the lesson that I've learned from my teachers and hope it will have some value. So how do you teach residents? Obviously, there are a lot of skills that you need to have as a neurosurgeon: surgical skills, clinical skills. You have to be aware of, your situation. You have to be good at operating room etiquette, the leadership, decision-making, resilience, burnout, emotional. So there are a lot of things that essentially you want to teach to residents, both direct and indirect. But before I go ahead and speak of some of the things, I'd like to share this slide about the Dunningkruger effect, which I think us as young neurosurgeons, as teachers, should keep in mind every time we teach our residents. So this is essentially a pretty famous graph from this psychologist. They're talking about, the relationship between confidence and competence. And early in our training, and it's good, it's actually, applied for every type of training. When you really start and you know nothing, you feel pretty good. You're absolutely sure that you're the best. But then the more you know and more competence you become, you start to realize that you don't know almost anything. And this is when your confidence is starting to go down to the valley of despair, right? I'm never going to figure this out. It's harder than I thought. And then with more time and practice, you're starting to feel that things are, fitting into place. And then again, with time and expertise, your confidence and expertise is getting back up. And I think that our role as teachers or mentors is to be able to guide the residents throughout this graph since the beginning to, kind of set their goals and set the stage to success while gauging where they are at this stage. If your residence is, feeling a little bit too confident in the OR and think that they can do things that above their expertise and have this lack of insight, is your goal and your role to kind of, make them aware of that. And then when your residents are in a valley of despair, but you feel that their competence is getting better, it's your role also to give them the empowerment to go ahead and feel more confident. And I think that this is, one of the most important take-home message from this presentation. So I'll speak about a few core components of education. And I divided it into 5: theoretical, clinical, surgical, manual, professional, or professionalism and personal growth. And I'll share what we're doing here in the States and at least how I've been practicing the last couple of years. So the way we do it in terms of theoretical, we have once a week, we have grand rounds. Usually it's both internal speaker, someone from our department, or external speaker. And I think that this is pretty important for 2 reasons. One, it lets the resident engage in a large audience settings, and just replicating what Marissa said, it's a lot of practice. So you actually get those residents to work on their papers, work on their presentations, and then present it in a large audience. And once you get enough practice in that, this is how you get better. And also for the external speakers, we bring a lot of colleagues from different hospitals talking about their research. And I think the benefit of it is that as a young resident, you get the opportunity to hear what people are doing in other places. And not only that, you can then engage, with questions and get to know the person better, because essentially, at least here in the US, you really want to think about opportunities for the future, and that's a good time to do that. One of the other things that we're doing once a week is case preparation. Every resident once a week will prepare a few slides with a case that he was operating on, the approach, the theory, some videos or footage from the microscope, and we'll go through the essentially the case. And then one thing that we also encourage here is away rotations and research fellowships. So I think that one of the most important things that I did during my training is to go ahead and try to do as many away rotations as I can, just to know how other medical system works. And not only that, when you go to good places to do research, you're not only learning a lot about, the the nutshells of your field, but you also get to know people that you can collaborate in the future. And this is just a few examples of my video atlas that I created during residency. So essentially I recorded almost every case and created this atlas just for my own teaching. And this is what I encourage residents to do, to go look at the footage, prepare the case, look at the anatomy, the pathology, and then look at the actual OR video and create those little clips that I still go back and look into. And this is what we do with our residents. Then the other, I would say, part of education is obviously clinical. There is not much to say here. The more you learn, the more you earn. And this is actually the hard work, spending days and nights treating patients in the ICU and being the consult, the resident on consult with a pager. I think that nothing can replace the hours being spent on that. And obviously we're doing teaching rounds. So once a week, we'll go with the residents and we'll do a teaching round, which we will pretty much focus on the ICU patients and ICU care. And that's, I think, another value that you add when it comes to clinical education. And then about surgical and manual, I think that we're living in this area where we're very privileged and lucky to have those very cool labs and augmented reality and very fancy anatomy models, and we actually use it here. What I usually do is I will prep all the cases with this one of the software, and we'll go with the residents and look at the approach with either augmented reality or just with the neuronavigation with the planning. And pretty much, I think that it really helps the retention rate for the residents before the case to go over the approach, the positioning, the incision, where do you want to do the craniotomy, where do you want to, how do you want to pin, then the next stages of how do you want to approach a tumor, for example, or the aneurysm. And this is very handy because what you essentially do, you give them a mental preparation before the case, and then they can go ahead and feel much confident and comfortable doing that. And I really like this type of teaching. And I cannot talk about surgical teaching without talking the science of peak performance and the science of teaching. And there is a lot of written about that. One of the most famous books is Peak. And essentially what I do with the residents before every case is mental representation, so we can go over the case. What are the next steps? What are the first stages? What happens if we encounter any problems? And I think it really helps with troubleshoot, because once you go with a resident, also for yourself before a case, simple cases and hard cases, I think this is where you gain mastery. And obviously, this 10 hours rules to mastery, but also good teaching matters. So it's not only practice. If you go with your residents and you go over the case and you think together about the next stages, and I do it before every case because it helps me prepare, I think it adds a lot of value in terms of the confidence that the residents gets for the case. And then the fourth aspect that I like to talk about, resident education, is mentors and professionalism. And I would not be where I am today without my mentors, right? And I encourage really to our residents to find mentors, both personal and professional. And mentorship does not have to be something very direct in terms of you don't have to take your resident every day. But I think there is a lot of indirect and nonverbal communication when you come to mentors, which you can learn a lot just by listening and see how they approach, life in general and neurosurgery in particular. And I think that a good mentor will essentially, teach the residents or anybody how to deal with problems with themselves. And even today, when I do cases and find myself in stressful situation, I would go ahead in my head and do some mental representation, ask myself, what would my mentor do right now? And I think this is a very important aspect of resident education. Encourage them to get good mentors and become a mentor yourself. And then I would like to end with this theory this actually IZOF is actually individual zone of optimal functioning. And this is a theory that came from sports medicine or the psychology of sports and the psychology of high performance. And essentially what it says, it's a lot of text, I know, and it's not what Marisa just told us to do, but essentially what it says is that every person has a different field of optimal zone in terms of anxiety and alertness. And I think it's our role to gauge our residents, what is their the best zone of optimal functioning. And, you know, we all know this, right? If our arousal or our stress level are very low, our performance are very low. If our arousal is very high and we're too stressed, so then our performance starts going down as well. But there is this, you know, in between, this right, you know, in the bell shape, the top of the curve, this place where everybody should have the maximum performance when arousal. But this is not true for anyone. Because if you look at the right table, you see 3 different athletes. As I said, it's coming from the psychology of peak performance and athleticism. And some athletes, their zone is actually in the lower level of stress and arousals. And some athletes, their, you know, IZOF is on a higher level of arousal. And I think it's our role as teachers to identify what resident benefit from which kind of arousal or stress levels. And I think once we do that, and we really try to kind of look at the psychology of the residents that are under a lot of stress and very busy and, you know, sleep deprived, and see what is their best or optimal zone of education. Because if essentially we want them to learn and we want their retention rate to be the greatest, I think it's our goal to gauge which level of arousal they'll be the most prone to learning. And maybe the most important, you know, lesson that I'd like to teach my residents is humility, right? You start your residency as a neurosurgeon and you think you're on top of the world and your ego is inflated. And with time and the more mistakes you make, you know, the more you should be aware that humility is one of the most important aspects of being a surgeon in general and neurosurgeon in particular. And maybe this is, you know, obviously this is something that's common for all of us, but I would just wanted to enforce it because I think it's one of the most important lessons we need to teach ourselves and our residents on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathaniel. Very interesting perspectives, which we'll discuss all together at the back. Christian, I think we can move straight to your presentation about taking all these lessons and tips into discussion groups and breakout sessions, which are particular mechanisms of teaching.
Thank you, Andreas. I hope everybody can see my slides. So my task is to talk about how I manage discussion groups and breakout sessions. So many of you will be aware of those formats from the training courses, and those who are not might think about why is that important for me to learn how to prepare and learn what we think about when we prepare a discussion group. So first of all, it is a well-known ENS training course format, and it scores usually very well during the evaluations. And that's the foremost point, it can be easily adopted for your resident training, for your student education as well. It depends on the cases you select. And also for grand rounds, if you have very interesting cases or cases you want to discuss with your fellow colleagues on how to approach them. First, we'll start with the breakout session, just to give you a little heads up how this works usually during the training courses. So this is an example from the vascular course. You have the moderator, you have the expert, and you have presenters. And then you have a bunch of facilitators. That's necessary because you have several groups on tables discussing the cases. This is the upscaling for the training courses where you have to accommodate 150 trainees. If you do this in your home department, you don't need all those facilitators anyway. So this is what the EANS provides as a kind of rule or regulation for the format. So you have a case presentation that should be really quick, and I will go on that later. You have a group discussion of around 15 minutes. Then the groups present their results, and then you have an expert talking another 10 minutes about the evidence behind that. And then you have the case solution by the case presenter. So for the case presenters, very important, pick a real case. People will figure out really quick if you make a case up. And you have to adapt to your audience. You have to take a lower average difficulty case. No one likes a show off of a Spätzle grade 5 AVM you took out last week. You have to leave room for discussion while preparing your case. So maybe different solutions should be possible. You should potentially cover controversial topic. And the solution, of course, should be somewhat according to evidence-based medicine. So it's not necessarily that you solve the case in a different way. For the presenter, you should have a structured history and clinical investigation. There, where it comes up to be a real case is important, because at some point you might fall over your own story. And you have to select the important slices of imaging or provide a video of the images. And that's basically all you need as a presenter. The moderator's job is fairly easy. He or she has to keep order in the room. So first of all, the discussion on the tables in the larger groups, or discussion generally should be in the entire case solution, so all the steps, but with a particular question for all and every groups. So there should not be like 8 groups answering 8 times the same question, because you will be done by the second group. But most importantly, order. So a facilitator has a very important job. And it's always in between 2 sides. Always you're guiding the discussion, which is good, or it's very difficult to not take over the discussion, which is really bad. You should ask questions, but you should not be questioning the discussion. You should support the trainees or your residents or your students with knowledge. You shouldn't impose on your knowledge. And you should respect different approaches. There is not only one solution, as we all know from our clinical practice. So you should not be a narrator or a teacher. The expert opinion should not be just the talk, and should not be 25 PowerPoint slides with everything. It should sum up the solution and show the evidence for it. So no lecturing on your personal opinion, should keep it short and simple. And the take-home messages should be, if possible, based on evidence, of course. Little different to that is the discussion group. It's not so structured in its design. And I'd like to thank Andreas Rabe for this very, very good How I Do It proposal to prepare a discussion group, which I took several parts from. First of all, the purpose is to discuss clinically relevant aspects of the diagnosis, the decision-making, and the management of certain neurosurgical diseases. It should focus the trainees or the residents, you can put in every word you like, or the students' attention to different opinions and controversies. And you should check the knowledge of your trainees, students, residents, or whoever you train with a discussion group. Very important do's and don'ts, and also, as in the breakouts, really easy to fall into that, is lecturing. Let the trainees talk about 80% of the time, then the balance between talking and listening is actually good. No text slide, no illustrations, work with images, and that's basically it. As a discussion group moderator, you should fuel and guide discussions. So questions like why, what, or and then, and why not are the questions you should actually bring up. Imaging slides only, as I mentioned before, and have several cases ready in terms of a very quick solution of some cases. And then it's your job to summarize the key messages out of the discussion. And you should include every trainee. So this depends on the size of the group, obviously. So if you have, like in the last courses, you have double the number of trainees, it's difficult in about half to 3/4 of an hour to include each and every one of the group. But in smaller groups, you should actually point a finger or whatever you like to a person, say, what do you think? What's your solution to that? So the trainees or residents should not go out like that, having done nothing the whole day. So if you combine discussion groups and breakouts, and that's what Netanel already touched on, then you end up with some kind of teaching rounds, or as I would say, the teaching rounds we like to do. We have these afternoon sessions for residents mainly, so also some staff members included because they're interested, but it's mainly targeted for the residents. What we do is real cases. So we have centrally stored like Excel file, a list that is filled and maintained by a resident. So if they see an interesting case or something is discussed and they want to discuss in more depth, then they put the name on there. And then we sit down and discuss, like in the, it's in Austria, we do it very similar to the oral board exams. So that's the kind of idea and a preparation behind that. The residents present the case, and I would like to call it the trainer is the one who moderates. So that's where we come with a discussion group and breakout. The questions are usually asked directly to one of our residents. What do you see on the images? How would you approach the case? Or why would you take that or a different route to the case? Ideally, and not everywhere, not anytime ready, you have the microscope recording of the case for some technical nuances, but that also includes a lot of work. And I'm very, very happy that Netanel showed us his video bibliography of his operations, because that's actually really worth the time, but it's a lot of work, you have to admit. So this is how we train our residents through the formats that I have learned during my presence at the ENS courses as a trainee and as a faculty. And actually, I think that works pretty well. It needs to be adopted for every different department, but I think it's worth the time. And it's actually the feedback from the residents by using those formats is really, really good. And they're really happy and thankful. If you as a young faculty or even as an older resident take your time to discuss cases with them. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Christian. Excellent. And a nice wrap up of all the topics. So we heard from Katrin how to do presentations. We heard from Marisa how to engage with the audience. We heard from Netanel to how to focus on residents or trainee education. And we heard from Christian about managing and running discussion groups, facilitating breakout sessions. So I am working from a phone and a computer because neither are fully functioning. I can't see any questions, but we'll dive to the roundtable. And we have David Neduka, who is the chairman in Prague. We have Laura Lipa, who is one of the young neurosurgeons, the host of the next young neurosurgeons meeting in Florence, a couple of weeks from now. We have Agis Papanastasiou, chairman of the training committee, and Nikolai Velinov, chairman of the hands-on courses. So people who have presented a lot and have gone through the ups and downs of facing different kinds of audience. Let's start with ladies first. Laura, what are your thoughts about the presentations?
So I'm glad that the participants are so numerous, because I felt that the presentations were awesome. I wish I had this kind of presentation when I was resident, so that I could learn many of the things that have been said today. You won't hear about them in your residency unless some dedicated people, a group of people cares about you and will tell you this. So I'm glad to see this is finally happening on a large scale, as it was today. So I really thank you all, because this was very, very important. Starting with how to make a presentation, which is something that really this should be one of the very first things in an academic context to teach our residents, and we don't. So I think I will make this a priority for myself. So thank you for for bringing this to our attention. It was very important.
Thank you, Laura. Vakis and I represented the ENS with others last week at the World Congress. Vakis, what presentations did you see that stood out, or one or the other, that could be used for learning? Some tips from them.
Well, I mean, I think that, well, you learn from all of them. And I mean, what I was glad about today is that I actually learned from all the presentations, which is very good. And I think that unfortunately, I saw a lot of presentations that reinforced, or if I didn't know, would tell me what not to do.
That's also good.
You know, it is. I mean, you know, when you go and you think, God, you know, the monotone of the presentation, which I appreciate, was a World Federation, so a lot of people, English was not their first language, so it was very difficult. But when you get a presentation from somebody who cannot even speak English, and is just reading something out with no intonation, okay, you don't have to be a Shakespearean actor to bring passion into what you present. It would go down very well. You don't need to do that, but if there is no undulation of your voice or anything, then you've lost your audience. It doesn't matter what you're giving them. And I think that that's one message that people, going back to what Katrina was saying about keeping it simple, but it has to be a story. And I'm so pleased that you mentioned that, because it's one of my pet ideas, if you like, or, you know, humans are storytellers, and we only understand things if they are in a story, and we can make up stories to highlight things. And I think that is part of what your presentation, to be successful. The person should ideally see a journey and see the beginning and see the end and follow you as you go through. Doesn't matter whether it is a discovery of a new gene, or it is a walk into an Amazonian forest. It doesn't matter what it is. So, and I think it is practice makes perfect, but actually not always. Perfect practice makes perfect. And that is what it is important. And I think that Nathaniel's really showed me what I should have been doing, but it's a bit too late for me now. But I think the younger neurosurgeons really, you know, when you find a good case, now you have the facilities, you've got the equipment, you've got the technology, you know, make a little, 2-minute video of your operation. You know, when you're on your, 10,000 operation, trying to find that one back into your backlog, forget it, ain't gonna happen. So create your own database of interesting things, interesting cases that went wrong. You know, that's once you get to the expert stage, then you probably want to talk more about the things that went wrong rather than the things that went right, because the ones that went wrong hopefully will be more rare, and you want to talk about rare things. So, and bring all those into training your students and residents, and that's what Christian suggested, which I think was a very good. If it's a successful format, bring it forward. And that's why we are keen for these webinars to happen. I'm keen to include younger neurosurgeons into the training course, and the aim is for at least 1 or 2 of you to on a regular basis be part of the faculty, because we need to renew, but you also need to learn, you need to perform, and then that's the sort of winning formula, if you like. I will stop now.
A lot of pearls in there. I think the story is a good reminder, and I remember some of you will be aware of the advice of, you're going to go stand there, you're going to tell them a story, but try and facilitate them to understand that it's a story. So you put a contents page straight after your disclosure. So you're going to tell them what you're going to tell them, then you're going to tell them, and then you're going to tell them what you told them. So you always enhance what has been delivered. And I think that's one of the things that I always remember, that make sure you don't digress, don't overload your slides. I think Katrin made it very clear that if you put too much in the slide, that you as a presenter are a little bit intimidated. That means that slide is way too busy. let's ask Nikolai. Nikolai, none of us are native English speakers. Vakis mentioned that some people may have a difficulty with presenting in an international audience. You've gone through that, I've gone through that, everyone is going to have to go through that. How do you deal with presenting in a language that you don't work in on a day-to-day basis? What's your tips?
Well, in my opinion, preparation is one of the most important things that you do. If you're going to present in a language that you don't feel comfortable in, and you need to address the audience and you want to, let's say, emotionally touch the audience, preparation should be perfect. As Vakis elegantly put it, practice itself is not enough. Perfect practice is what we need. And of course, well, for let's say most of the teachers in ENS, let's say are good in English or become better in English, but for the people that have difficulties with that, I believe that the most important thing is to try to give your message simple. Don't try to make a very complicated presentation, rather than make your point stand in a very, let's say, simple way. And this is something that I also learned in the ENS. If you cannot present it in 10 minutes, then you probably cannot present it at all. The message in your presentation has to be simple. You should be able to explain it and be understood on the level you're giving. So, in my opinion, while presenting in an let's say non-native language, you should prepare, you should practice, and of course you can also try to present. For example, you're at home, you're at your department, and you're going to go and present on an ENS course. Do a presentation with your trainees, show them what you have prepared, and see, some of them might by themselves say, okay, we didn't understand anything, this is bullshit, or your body language did not really feel good to me. And having said that, Marisha, after your photos, I just cannot stand saying this. No teacher can dare compare his body language with the body language of Professor Claudius Tomei. I agree. It's I think it's you have given the essence of it. But I agree. I have always believed that a good teacher explains and shows, but a great teacher inspires. And this is what ENS did also for me. You get your idols as a resident. You go on the ENS courses, and then you see great neurosurgeons, and you see they're actually regular people that can talk to you and can explain to you. There's not this was also very shown in a presentation. It's not about the ego, or I can do AVM Special 5, and it's the idea behind is that actually all these idols that you have, they were where we were, where all of you have been young neurosurgeons, and then you grow and then you learn. And the discussion groups, in my opinion, and the breakout sessions are the essence and one of the most important things in the training courses. This is something that really, I think that is, I have in my heart, and this is something that has led to the decision of the ENS training committee to reduce the timing of lectures and increase the discussion. I think Vakis will back me for this, and this is something I absolutely agree and would propose for any of you. If you can do this on a local level with your residents, that would be great experience for them and yourself.
Thank you very much, Nikolai. Good advice. David, you're one of the youngest full professors in Europe. You've been doing this for quite a while. What's your advice? What are you doing nowadays different to what you used to do at the beginning?
Well, thank you very much. And I really appreciate this webinar. And I think that the presentations were really excellent. And speaking about the presentation, what I changed as a chairman, every resident is now obliged to go for 2 days course, how to present, prepare the presentations, how to act. And we all know that we are different. For example, in my team, my deputy is an excellent neurosurgeon, but he will never be able to present. Always, he tried so many times. So there are some desperate cases, like my deputy, but the vast majority of residents are ready to learn how to present and how to make a good presentation. So it's now in their curriculum. They have to take part on this at least 2 days preparation course. What changed really in my mind, what I follow in EANS, what is very positive development is the change of the speakers. I don't speak about aging of the speakers, but I speak about the attitude, how to present. When I was a young resident, the majority of lectures were, I am big guy, I do everything, as it was mentioned, and now the way of presentation is totally different, more open-minded and not so selfishly neurosurgical as in the past. So that's one point. What I changed in my department that was mentioned also before, that every resident has to present the cases during our Friday morning conference. That was different, and he has to present first hand to the other trainees, and only then me or other faculty members interact. So that's the philosophy which I took and what I changed in my department. So I think it's really important. And the very last comment, not to be redundant, speaking about practicing, I have to say that, of course, I'm not a native speaker, and I had the problems, and I still have the problems, and I know I should still improve. But I have to say that in the beginning, I was always with tachycardia of 200 pulse and really shaking and not confident. And I believe that, and I thank my previous mentor or my mentor that I was sent for so many meetings that I somehow managed to make me calmer and to make me wilder in the evening. So that's my comment.
Thank you, David. So basically, we're all more or less accepting that nobody is born ready for this. There's a bit of preparation time, and depending on the audience and the occasion, that preparation time can help even the most experienced speaker. Anna, you're on the background. Are there any questions from the audience?
No questions in the Q&A box.
No questions. Any questions from the panel, from the round table, or any comment?
My question goes to the other panelists. Does anybody of you hire a professional actor who would teach the residents?
It's a good idea.
No.
It's a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sounds like the answer is no, but it should be considered.
It should be considered.
Absolutely.
Well, I have a comment on that. Maybe not an actor, but coaches. So we know from sports and athleticism, we know that everybody that is doing high performance, anything, has a coach, both a mental coach, nutritional coach, sleeping coach. And I think that as neurosurgeons, even though we're dealing, with one of the most, delicate organ in the body, we don't have coaches. And I think that the new paradigm would be to get a resident a coach that would not only teach how to be a better person, but how to take care of our body, our mental health, our physical health, our nutrition, our sleep hygiene. And I think that if any sports person has that, it's time to change the paradigm towards surgeons as well, as we're dealing with very high stakes situations. So that's my personal belief. And hopefully, within the next couple of years, we'll start to see that everywhere.
That's a good point, Nathaniel. In fact, I'm sure you're aware, and others will be aware of the introduction of coaching by Atul Gawande in the States, who once the faculty or staff at Harvard hospitals, he then engaged one of his old attendings to watch what he was doing, and he said the list was endless, if I remember correctly. But before we even go that far, one thing I found very useful was when I it was like a kind of coaching when two residents were videoing each other giving a presentation. And I recommend people video themselves when they give a practice talk, because you'll be surprised on how many things one does that that same one person criticizes others of doing. And it could be simple things like the gaps in between phrases can be filled with unnecessary sounds, or we have our eyes stuck on the slides looking down all the time instead of engaging with the audience. And that suggests we need to know our slides much better. We don't need to depend on them. Another tip was, what happens if the computer breaks down? Are you going to say, I can't give my talk? What's your backup plan? Can you at least have some summary delivered without visual aids? And I think there's a lot of things that can phase any experienced speaker. So there's no end in the learning of presenting, and there's no perfect way of presenting, but we can all make our own presentations better. Let's have some.
That was my case as well. Like David, when I was resident, they sent me to the meetings like that, and they had to prepare my presentations and just try there. So I think there is a lack of presentations skill formation for us that we can try to cover a little bit with our experience, and then they can have the help we didn't have. Bakis, sorry.
What I advise, I mean, following from that, what I advise people to do sometimes is to give a 10-minute talk with one slide.
Oh.
And see whether you can keep your, well, I know, but it is the same concept. We used to give lectures of 1 hour, and then you had to condense them down and put them in 10 minutes, and you think, oh my God, I cannot do this. Of course, well, you have to, but you know, you need to then decide what is important, what is the message I want to do, and go there. And if you do have a story, you don't really need a prop, but just so that you don't feel too bad, you can have one slide. But it's a 10-minute talk with one slide. And then you've done that, then you realize it doesn't matter if the computer breaks down.
Yeah.
There is a question, Andreas.
Sorry?
There is a question in the chat.
Yeah.
The phone, so do you mind reading it out? Apologies.
The question to Katrine, in terms of PowerPoint and background, it has been said that black slides with white writing is the best to increase attention from the audience. Your experience?
So I think that's actually true. If you look, but sometimes I mean, in this presentation, I did use a brighter background. It wasn't, I didn't use a black one. It's actually what they are trying to emphasize is the contrast to sort of draw the attention to the text that you're presenting. In my experience, it's good if the background is subtle. Okay, so if it's bright or if it's black or whatever, if you sort of tone it down somehow, as I think I try to have this leather type of thing, or it looks like you're looking at some beige colored background that I think is quite nice to look at for the eye. It doesn't sort of shock you. That's my tip.
There is another question here by, the name is complicated, to Withy. It is possible to add a training and presentation to the residency program, possibly as a mandatory course? What do you think?
I'm going to say something about that. I think we have really good talks put together in the research, ENS research course, which is always in connection with the Young Neurosurgeon meeting. I think if you have a possibility to do a short course like that, that's really great, because that's a one-day course. And so everybody can spare 1 day. And if you can combine it with the Young Neurosurgeons meeting, that's a really good mix and a really good opportunity. It gives you a basic tool about presentations, about how to write grant proposals, which is also a sort of presentation, but with a different medium, okay? So you're writing things down instead of orally presenting them or talking about them. And also has some sort of like, what do reviewers look at? What do people who read my grant proposal look at? How do they interpret it? So it's a really good mix, I think.
Planning to have I mean, just to show the importance of this, and I think it is very important, we're planning next year for one day before the training course, we're going to have a training the trainers course. You know, I mean, now the facility is there to do that. I mean, before you just learned by mistakes and you picked points from good presentation and bad presentations, but there's nothing wrong with some formal presentation, teaching and skills and so on. So didn't have enough time this year, but certainly for the training courses next year, there will be a training the trainers course.
It's an excellent aspect. And of course, people can start small, you know, we can present to colleagues in our department and have friends video us and look at each other's presentations. Then we can go to regional meetings, national, international. The principles are always the same. So I hope we have managed to deliver some of the pearls of wisdom that people have acquired over the years. But you yourselves in the audience will have to generate your own formula by choosing what to incorporate and what not to incorporate in your strategies. We are bang on time. We said 70 minutes and we have the last 30 seconds. So I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. On behalf of everyone on the ENS, we would like to invite you to, if you're not members, to become members. If you're free, come to Florence for the conference of the Young Neurosurgeons. Local host is Laura, host from the Young Neurosurgeons is Marisa, but everyone here has been part of that group. So from Sweden and Katrin, from Spain and Marisa, from Israel and Netanel, from Austria, Christian, from Czech Republic, David, from Italy, Laura, from Cyprus, Lagis, from Bulgaria, Nikolai, and from Scotland, myself. Have a great afternoon and evening, and hope to see you soon.
Yes, please
Thank
come.
you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.